Welcome to WebRTC Tips by WebRTC Ventures. I'm Aaron Syme, CEO and founder at WebRTC Ventures. In today's WebRTC tip, I want to talk about a specific issue with unit testing. So doing any sort of automated testing in software development is a really important best practice. Often hard to do, particularly hard to do with video applications like we specialize in at WebRTC Ventures. And so one of our senior WebRTC engineers, Justin Williams, he's going to talk to us in this tip about a specific issue called bleeding unit tests, where a unit test will not run reliably because it's dependent on other things outside of that test. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Justin to talk to you today about bleeding unit tests.
So today, with various tools and services available, developing applications with WebRTC can be done really efficiently. So, for example, many CPaaS platforms offer a wide variety of features which abstracts out the complex details of WebRTC away from the developer, and this enables developers to build new features really quickly. However, with rapid development like this, we do see a need to maintain the code base well, and unit tests are obviously really good for that. They should be written to verify and validate code changes. Might be having a technical issue. Oh, I'll continue. Okay, yeah, so...
No, you're good.
Okay, perfect. We're good. So yeah, of course, unit tests can have their own issues as well. One common issue that we commonly see with JavaScript projects is bleeding unit tests. So a bleeding unit test occurs when the execution of a test affects the shared state between itself and another test. For a test suite with a bleeding unit test, while running each test one at a time, they can pass as expected, but when running the whole test suite together, test failures are seen. So bleeding unit tests can also mask other issues, as they can cause false positives. And that's really tough to kind of decipher and find when you're having these problems. For example, bleeding tests may not have their effects seen until a new test is added, or in a worst case maybe scenario, some implementation in the application code itself is changed. With a larger code base and possibly hundreds of tests, a bleeding test can be very difficult to find and resolve. The resolution can often be expensive, frequently requiring a refactor of the tests and sometimes the application code itself. So this is where factories come in really nicely for unit tests. When writing unit tests, you want high coverage, you want all known edge cases for your program or unit under test to be tested thoroughly. And this can be difficult if the tests are not written cleanly, but a very useful design pattern here is using factories. So factories make maintaining unit tests easier, as they provide a lot of clarity as to what the code is doing. Factories are very expressive and easy to reason about. Using factories ensures that resources are created in isolation, shared state is limited, and the common convention of do not repeat yourself is easily attained. When resources are created in isolation, it can be made clear that certain resources are just created for a single unit test. And this pattern helps avoid bleeding unit tests. So here we see a couple tests for our call service class. Two simple tests just to check the behavior that the call service class has on our call model. The first test, we check to ensure that if a call is in an invalid state, the start call API throws an exception. In the second test, we check to ensure that the state of the call is updated as expected when the start call API is invoked. So what we're seeing here is each test using the same shared call model. And this was initially created by the author of this test to not duplicate the code. However, we see that one test is changing the call model during its execution. And this change to the call model affects the following tests if they're run together. If these tests are run in isolation, no issues seen. But running in a suite, they can fail unexpectedly. So for this example, it's pretty clear to see the issue of the bleeding test. However, with more complex tests and large number of tests, this issue can be quite difficult to identify. So here we see a small refactor to the test to resolve the bleeding test problem. So these tests have been refactored to use a factory for the call model. And the call service instance is also constructed before each test. The factory is more descriptive and easy to use for the call model. So the behavior of the factory is very clear, and the tests are a little bit more easy to reason about. Another benefit here is that if the implementation of the call model changes, the factory might not need to change. So as we can see, call service, we've declared it early in the code so it can be nicely identified by our reader as this is the unit under test. The before each constructs the call service so that each test is given a fresh value, and the factory usage clearly states how we want to create a call. And it makes it easier to read and refactor in the future. Factories are a great pattern to use for unit tests. It helps the developer focus on testing the behavior of the units under test without having to worry too much about implementation details. Factories are an easy design pattern to use for many areas of a code base, not just limited to unit tests. Factories can make code easier to read, reduce the amount of code that has to change for refactor, and reduce boilerplate and the potential for bugs. So yeah, here we've solved our bleeding unit test problem while making our tests more maintainable and understandable.
Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing that tip with us today on WebRTC Tips by WebRTC Ventures. If you're interested in building a live video application, we'd certainly be happy to apply our experience as a leading integrator of WebRTC live video into web and mobile applications. To learn more about us, to contact us for a quote, just reach out to us at WebRTC.ventures. Visit our website, contact us there. You can also follow us on Twitter at WebRTC Ventures. Thanks again for joining us for this WebRTC tip.